In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we're recording. Okay. So I'll start by making the intro and then segue into what we're doing different. Okay. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where we explore two stories, one historic, one true crime about red flaggy relationships that should have ended and did not. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sweaty. Like I said, I literally just got home from yoga and I am gross, but I needed to record this because it's getting late here.
I know, I'm sweaty too. We just drove home from Las Vegas, so from Las Vegas to Joshua Tree, and shit, it's hot. It's like so hot driving through the desert. It's like, and then like you can't even get the car not hot, and then the house has to get cooled down, and so yeah. Also
It's
sweaty.
like it's consistently 100 degrees like every day in Austin now.
That sounds terrible.
It's awful. It's awful. And it's been like a
Oh my God.
particularly bad week because Luna hurt herself really badly. She
Oh,
basically ripped one of her nails on her toe completely off.
oh my
And
God,
if you know anything
gross.
about dogs, dogs have a
Yeah,
quick that's
Luna's
just
a
like
dog.
yeah, Luna's a dog. And the quick in the nails of a dog is just full of like nerve endings and the blood
Oh my
vessels.
God.
She was just bleeding all over the house.
Oh, poor baby.
And because of that, you know, the activity we usually do is she goes swimming in the pool because it's hot. It's too hot for her to be walking outside, right? But I can't have her in the pool because she'll get an infection. So
Aw,
yeah, so she's not having a good time, but
Poor
we'll
thing.
get through it. Yeah,
poor
it'll work
thing.
out. So do you want to share the exciting news?
Which one?
Email.
But we're at the end.
Oh, okay. All right. Fine. Okay. So we're going to tee things up here. But one thing that's going to be different that is worth calling out is we've decided on changing up the production schedule. So going forward, instead of both Taylor and I telling our stories in one episode released at once, one of us will tell our story. We'll release that on our regular scheduled time on Monday. The other one will tell the story and we'll release that at the regular scheduled time on Wednesday or Thursday. That's the
We're
game
gonna give
plan.
it a shot. I think
We're gonna give it a shot.
it could be fun just because then you don't have to fast forward if you don't want to listen to one or the other. You can choose, and then we can like re-release them a little bit shorter. One story you can without having to try to find it in an episode. We're gonna give it a shot.
There you go. We'll see how people react
Cool.
to it. Awesome. Taylor, is today my turn?
No, it's mine.
You're going first? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what I'm drinking. So
Okay.
it has nothing to do with anything. I feel like I'm at this age where I gotta start being healthier. And so I'm drinking Central Market Kombucha Matcha Lime because it's good for your gut health.
I feel like that's so. We could say that it's such a blanket thing to be like it's good for your gut. That makes absolutely no sense, but fine. Also, I've been drinking kombucha mixed with vodka, and you can't even taste the vodka, so it's not great, but it's good.
So you're doing it for health reasons too then.
Yep, for my gut and my liver to make sure they're both working really hard
Balances
for
each other out.
you.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Always, as always. In real life, I'm drinking a Pacifico because, like I said, it's hot. I only had 2 beers. I'm drinking this one. Oh God, and then and a Diet Coke. But my drink that pertains to my story today of something that was doomed to fail is motor oil. I don't even know really what motor oil is. Like oil that you put in your car. I don't know what it does.
I think that's basically it. Yeah.
And you know what it reminded me of? Do you remember like 10 years ago when we Googled how to cut someone's brake lines and we found out that it wasn't as easy as the movies make it sound?
Yeah, these manufacturers are getting really crafty with where they put their brake lines in the cars.
Like, can we just cut someone's brake lines? And the answer is not really. So, oh well, now we know.
Now we know.
Now you don't have
Lessons
to
learned.
Google it, so you're not in trouble. Everyone else. Okay, cool. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to get to my story in like 5 minutes, but I have a preamble to my story.
Preamble away.
Here's how I got here. So it's July. It is not Women's History Month, but when it is Women's History Month, I always get mad at people for quoting Coco Chanel because she was a Nazi. I don't get mad at people. I just like tell them. I'm like, hey, it'd be cool if you didn't quote her because like, yes, she like did some business things, but also she bet on the Nazis.
What do people quote her for?
She has some like I don't even remember. She has like business things that, like women say, and like she's like a powerful. I don't even have an example. I should have had one, but I don't.
Yeah, but she could be a good business person. People could admire her for that and also think that she's a piece of shit for being a Nazi.
Yeah, but you cannot quote her anymore because we have other people you can quote. But you
Like
don't
who?
have to. Like anyone else. let me continue my story first.
Sorry. I gotta call you out on something. Whatever. Doesn't
No,
matter.
no, this is my whole point of this is like you can't, I'm gonna say in some cases you can't pick and choose like who you admire. You know, like we're gonna tear down Confederate general statues because they lost and they were shitty people. You know what I mean? But so Coco Chanel was a Nazi. Like that's full stop. So we can be like, she was a good businesswoman, but also like, who cares? There's other businesswomen. I actually do have a quote. I'll find it. I did this I did this recently. MC Walker is a woman who was a businesswoman. She was the first person in her family born out of slavery. She was a Black woman, and she has quotes like, "Don't sit down and wait for opportunities. Get up and make them." She was the first self-made women millionaire in American history, and she got there by selling women's hair products to Black women. That is someone who I want to hear from.
Okay. I can tell you feel passionately about this. So I'm not gonna debate it.
There's just no reason to do it anymore. Like we don't need to hear from Nazis anymore. Here's why. Here's my point of this. You know who else is a Nazi? Henry Ford.
Yeah,
Nazi.
I heard he did have some sentiments that were.
So I am tired of seeing white men quote Henry Ford. It happens a lot, like around, and whenever I see it, I just like want to throw up because I'm like, he is a bad person, and his quotes are not even that great. Like whether you think you can or can't, you're right. Who cares? That's stupid. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Henry Ford first. I know this is like, okay, so it's heavy and whatever, you might disagree with me. We don't have time to go talk about this forever, but you know, I've been reading a lot about presidents and first ladies and things like that. And like in the beginning, you know, they were enslavers, they did bad things. And so you have to stop and think about people as like there is no great, we can't look at this person, can't look at Washington and be like, he's a great man, because Washington did things that were really bad and he did things that were good. So we can like try to figure out how we have to decide for ourselves how we want to read that and how we want to look at that and how we want to look at him. I read a couple of really good books about this that I can totally recommend. How the Word Has Passed is a really good one. It's a reckoning about slavery across America by Clint Smith, where he like goes to Thomas Jefferson's house. There's people there who like don't know that Thomas Jefferson was like a huge slave owner. You know, so you have to like have those things in your mind when you're thinking about them. Also, like I know that you can't say that slavery was something that everybody did when the founding fathers were around. And I know that because John Adams did not have slaves. But I also know that John Adams laughed at his wife when she asked him to think about women when he was writing the Constitution. So nobody's perfect except Abraham Lincoln. This is like this is two sentences that could be a book. But Abraham Lincoln initially thought that maybe once Black people were freed, they would want to like go somewhere else and have their own country. So he like suggested it to a bunch of people, including Frederick Douglass. He's like, what if we sent you all to like South America? And they were like, no, we want to stay here. And he was like, oh, and he changed his mind. Because Abraham Lincoln is a very smart man. I don't even know where I am in my notes. Anyway, but there's no great man. There's no perfect man. And one person who is absolutely not perfect is Henry Ford. He's the Elon Musk of his generation. And this is why. Because he did a couple good things. He raised
Can I
wage.
interject on that?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me why the progressive perspective on Elon Musk is that he's a bad person? Because he single-handedly created green energy as a concept and popularized it to the point where the federal government has passed mandates trying to get the entire country off fossil fuels. And everybody's trying to catch up to Tesla because Tesla just like literally invented the market. And I know he didn't
Right,
invent
but
the
he didn't invent,
technology.
yeah.
I know he didn't invent the technology, but it's like what we learned coming up in tech, which is like the idea really doesn't matter. It's the execution that matters, and he executed on it.
Yeah, but
So,
now
like,
he turned Twitter into a right-wing cesspool where people are allowed to be very, very, very racist and very, very, very sexist and very, very, very like anti-LGBT people. Like it's bad over there.
So
And he agrees with all of it.
I actually don't even have Twitter on my phone. I don't really check it at all.
He turned it into a really, really, really bad place because he has like really bad ideas about humanity.
It's wild to me. It's so wild to me because it's like he literally just, we will come off of fossil fuels and reduce the impact on climate change literally off the back of his contribution to society, and now he's like a right-wing hero. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But go ahead. I disagree.
I think single-handedly is super not true. He just happens to have a lot of white man confidence.
Okay. We'll agree to
Um,
disagree.
okay. Well, Elon Musk is a bad person, and so is Henry Ford. Like, Henry Ford did not invent the car. That was Carl Benz. He did not invent the assembly line. That was Ransom E. Olds. So yeah, like you're saying, like he executed on things other people invented. Great. But so he also did something really dumb in 1915. He bought a boat and called it the Peace Ship and tried to sail to Europe with a bunch of journalists and solve World War One. And they were like, no, you're stupid. And
That
it
I
was
never
like,
heard of that.
that was like the celebrity singing Imagine during COVID, essentially. People
Right,
were like
right.
embarrassed for him. So right now, anti-Semitism in America is the highest it's been in decades, according to the Anti-Defamation League. So it's like very true that it's like a big problem right now. But Henry Ford wrote a book called The International Jew, which is a 4-volume set of anti-Semitic books that he published through his newspaper, Born Independent. His book you can still buy on Amazon, and white supremacists quote it all the time and fucking love it. Like they love it. Eventually, he was sued by Jewish groups around the country, and he had to shut down the paper in the late 1920s. And he apologized by saying that he didn't know that was happening in his newspaper. I'm literally looking at a copy of the newspaper that says the Ford International Weekly, the Dearborn Independent, the International Jew, the world's problem. So like, don't tell me you didn't know. Like, that's
fair.
stupid. You do. In 1931, 2 years before he became Chancellor of Germany, Hitler was interviewed in a magazine in Detroit, and the reporter went to his Munich office, and over Hitler's desk, he had a large portrait of Ford and said, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration."
That's not good.
So I just want to like, so let's just like not quote him anymore. Because like once Hitler loves you, I don't think we should listen to your voice anymore. Like, yes, you did things that were great. Yes, I'm happy I have a car. We have a Ford. I'm not mad at our truck, but like as a man, I don't think I'm done with it. I don't want to hear it anymore.
I mean, the Kennedys were also heavily into eugenics and
That one's awful, but this one is particularly awful. And like, I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration. Quote Adolf Hitler.
I will say the trucks are nice. The trucks are really good.
That's very nice. I'm not mad at the truck, but I am like annoyed with the people. So I'm just gonna make that's my preamble to this.
Sweet. So are we talking about Henry Ford today?
No, we're talking about the biggest failure in car design history, the Edsel. Have you heard of the Edsel?
Whoa, really?
Mm-hmm.
So I have heard of the Edsel. So whenever I got separated, so I had no home to live in LA, there was a building I almost like rented in downtown, and it was the original HQ for the Edsel, like their building, and they converted it into apartments.
That can't be true because it's from Michigan.
Okay, then I made that up. Hold on, what was that building?
The Edsel Club. No, that's a club of Edsels.
Wait, gas company lofts. Is that what it was?
I don't think it was the Edsel.
Okay. If I'm wrong, I'm gonna edit this out, and nobody's ever gonna know I was wrong.
Okay.
But I have heard of the Edsel. It was Edsel, Oldsmobile, Buick. That was kind of the Ford, obviously.
Right. Ford it's made by Ford.
Really?
Yes, that's our
Packard. It was the Packard, not the
Okay,
Edsel.
okay,
Yep,
fine.
yep.
That I give you. That's fine. In this book that I have, this is from a book called Business Adventures that I got during my time in business school. It was originally published in 1959, and they do say, this is a quote from this book, there may be an Aborigine somewhere in a remote rainforest who hasn't yet heard that things fail to turn out that way. Like, good for the Edsel. So he's like, everybody knows the Edsel's bad. It didn't work out.
Oh, that sucks.
So here's what happened. There's some red flags that I'll call out right now about the production of this car. There's the timing, the relying on market research, the name, obviously the name Edsel doesn't mean anything. The way the car looked, some specific things about it, the crappy make of the car wasn't always like put together all the way, and several really weird attempts to market it. So picture it. We're in 1955. We're in Detroit. We're in Michigan. Things are booming. People are starting to make money post-war. And people are starting to be like, I'm going to level up from my starter car. So Ford had a really great starter car, but people were leaving Ford to get a different kind of car, like an Oldsmobile, a Buick, a Pontiac. Like that was more of like the next level up once you started like to make money. They weren't going to another Ford model. So Ford wanted to capture that market. The people who are involved are Henry Ford II. He's the grandson of Henry Ford. His father used to be, he's a president of Ford. His father used to be president, and his father's name is Edsel Ford. So Edsel Ford is Henry Ford's son.
Got it.
There's the chairman of the board, Ernest Breach. There's the designer named Roy Brown. There's the head of the Edsel division, Richard Craffey. And there's also Robert McNamara. He works there during this time.
Wait, is this a model of a car, or is this like a brand, like a
It's a
Honda is?
brand.
Okay, okay,
Well, it's a line. There's a couple. I'll tell you the differences between them. It's a line of cars.
okay.
So Robert McNamara also works there. Do you know who he is?
He was Secretary of State or Secretary of something, right?
Defense. Yeah.
Defense. Okay.
During Vietnam and for Kennedy and the Cold War and Cuban Missile Crisis. So he becomes president of Ford in like 1959 and then does that for a little bit and then goes to work in DC. So he just like happens to be around. They decide they need to make a mid-level car. They call it the E car, E for experimental, which doesn't sound terrible. It sounds kind of cool, an E car. It's very, very secretive. It's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in there. Like the locks and the doors are changed every day. You don't know anyone who's working on it. Like it's very, very hush hush. They are like, we're gonna make the best car in the history of the world. We can't let anybody know. So they're just like building up this hype even before it even happened.
Makes sense.
They do a ton of market research and like a little bit too much. It's like a cautionary tale in market research because they ask people, well, I mean, and maybe also they do this a lot now and they just hadn't done it yet, but they're like, how does it make you feel? Like, how does this word make you feel? How does looking at this hubcap make you feel? What are your word associations? If we give you all these ideas for names, like, what do you want to have in a car? What is your dream thing in a car? And they asked so many people that I think it's something that happens in like software development now, where you're like,
Dude,
you can't do
seriously.
everything. Yeah.
What wasn't it actually Henry Ford, the one who said, if I ask people what to make, they'll say carriage with more horses. That's
Yeah, they'll
why
say a
you. That's
faster
why.
horse.
Yeah, a faster horse. That's why you don't ask people that many questions. You just have to iterate on your own
Mhm.
volition.
Yeah. Even though we don't quote Henry Ford anymore.
That is a good quote, though. That is a quote that is common in every product management book that's out there.
Well, then let's make a new one from someone who's not a Nazi.
Someone come out with a better quote.
Me. I'll say something. I'll think about it. Not a Nazi. Just work hard and have opportunities and do a good job. Chili Pinheiro, not a Nazi.
Yeah, we'll get the parentheses in there.
Incredible. Do a ton of market research, and then like they're looking at personas for the first time, like things like that we do see all the time in software development, but you're like, if you build what everybody wants as their dream car, you're gonna make a mess. And that's kind of what happened.
Homer did that in one of the Simpsons episodes.
One tagline they had is the smart car for the younger executive or professional family on its way up. So like very wordy and like, sure. In the very beginning, they suggested the name Edsel. It's Henry Ford's son. Henry Ford II is a president. And he's like, no, my dad would hate that. That's dumb. Everybody's like, this is a bad idea. We don't want to see our dad's name like on hubcaps. That's embarrassing. Like they're just like, no, like we just don't like it. No one knows what that word means. Like we don't want it. So they were like, okay, we're gonna go and pick a better name for this car. They went to a marketing firm and they were like, give us a name, and they sent back 6,000 names, and they were like, what?
It's not helpful at all.
Thanks for nothing, and then they like pared that down. They did things like free association. Like, what does this make you think of? What does this make you think of? What does the word look like backwards? Like they suggested DROF, which is Ford backwards, like kind of things. So some of the names that like actually became car names and are part of the Edsel like division, the line, which I'll tell you about, but like some ideas were like Citation, Corsair, Pacer, Ranger, Roundup, Voyager. All those are pretty good. Regent, Clipper, Monte Carlo.
Most of those are actual car names.
I know, but they didn't pick any of them. They also consulted a poet named Marianne Moore. They didn't pay her, but they were like, what ideas do you have? And here's a smattering of her bananas ideas. Utopian Turtle Top, Resilient Bullet, Mongoose Civique, Pastelogram, what other things? Maelstrom Verve, Silver Sword, Thunder Blender.
Thunder Blender
Varsity
is good.
Stroke. I like Thunder Blender and I like Silver Sword.
You call that Varsity Stroke?
Yeah.
What the fuck was she on? It's like slamming absinthe. Like
Most likely Bisondale, andante con moto. Anyway, terrible ideas. They did not pick any of her ideas. So in 1956, they're already working on this car. They're like, we have to have a name for it. We can't continue to call it the E-car forever. All three Ford brothers, all three grandsons of Henry Ford, were out of town, and the board had a board meeting. And the chairman was like, all these names are garbage. What happened to Edsel? I heard Edsel in the beginning. And they were like, yeah, well, we like rolled it out in the beginning. And the chairman was like, fuck it, just do it. It's
Wait,
Edsel.
isn't a
It's done.
Ford? Isn't a Ford the chairman?
Yeah, no. The chairman of the board is, I said his name a second ago.
Somebody who's
Um,
not in the family.
Not in the family,
Got it.
correct.
Okay.
The chairman of the board is Ernest Breach.
Okay.
He's the chairman. So even though the Ford is the president, but he's not there when they make the decision. And he's like, just fucking do it. It's called the Edsel. So they call it that. People are pissed because they said that whoever named it would get a free car, and they weren't allowed to pick Edsel, and then they picked Edsel. So they were like, that's not fair, but
That's
whatever.
fortunate.
So like you said, it's actually a line of cars. So there's the Edsel Ranger, which was the entry-level model. It could come as two-door or four-door, and also two-door like hardtop. It was mostly like a convertible. The Edsel Pacer was a little bit above the Ranger, had some more features. The Edsel Corsair was the top of the line model, had the most luxurious amenities. And then the Edsel Citation was the highest level within the lineup. Same thing, like a lot of like fancy things you could get added onto it. So now they want to unveil it, and they've been doing all of these things, like, teasing people with it. They do it piece by piece. They do presentations to like dealerships, and they show them like a hubcap and a wheel and a window, but they don't show the whole thing because they want people to be like talking about it. They would have like, when they started to eventually have the cars get delivered to dealerships, they would like put it on the back of a truck, but like put the sheet over it where it would like, you could kind of see it, like teasing it if you're driving by. And they thought
Yeah.
that people were going to like go crazy on the freeways, like following these Ford trucks, but they did not. People were like, what? Okay. One ad that they have a couple ads here that I think are hilarious, and they kind of remind me of things that like potentially Donald Trump would say, because one ad said, "We are proud of the Edsel." It's like so funny. Like if you have to say that, like, are you?
It's like when you try to convince someone, I'm smart, damn it.
You're like, okay, cool. They also had a lot of dealerships get rid of their current business just to sell the Edsel. It ended up being bad for a lot of folks, just to sell it.
That's nice.
September 4th, 1957 was the launch, and it was called E-Day, which feels like too soon. Because it like just have a D-Day. It wasn't
It's
bad.
a little, yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit too soon. By the end of the day, 3 million people had seen them in dealerships. So people were like going to like go look at the Edsel. Not a lot of people were buying them. 3 days later, the first Edsel was stolen. Guess where it was stolen?
Detroit.
Philly.
Oh, well, that makes sense too.
They also did this thing on October 13th, 1957, and this is wild. They did an hour-long special on CBS hosted by Bing Crosby, who was a shareholder in Ford, so it was like to his advantage. Hosted by Bing Crosby, included Frank Sinatra, Rosemary Clooney, Louis Armstrong, and also Bob Hope. Like,
That's pretty impressive. I mean, they kind of still do that. So I still follow cars like pretty closely. And like when GM was the biggest brand that came out, like, I don't know, like 3 years ago, they turned over like a new female CEO who came out and said 80% of our vehicles and products are going to be electric. And so they would have these huge launches. It was
mhm.
Apple launch where like she'd be talking
Yeah.
and then have like a celebrity come out and sing, and then they drive the cars on stage. It's super dorky, super nerdy. Like I like it,
Like, this
even
is exactly the same.
when
Yeah.
I've seen it because I'm just curious. Like, okay, so what's the direction? Where are y'all going with this? And it's good for just information purposes, but it's super nerdy.
Oh yeah. And I think, well, they didn't like, it was like a musical show. So then they like had the car like in the middle of it, And these people, I mean, are like the height of this type
Fame.
of like musical person.
Yeah.
And it was nominated for an Emmy, but did not win. But it was like the most successful thing of the
So
whole line. I would like to watch it someday. I'm sure it's on YouTube. I watched a little bit of it. It has like dancing and stuff. So it seems super fun. I don't know if I'd maybe buy an Edsel, but it seems fun. So here's what it actually looked like, and some of the things that were like a little bit weird about it, because people were like, this is like obviously the 50s, so like they want things to be futuristic, but it's kind of on the tail end of 50s styling, and we're like turning into the 60s. But one thing that happened that they had like on the steering wheel, like the Like the shifting and all of that was on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And you would press the buttons, but it was like hard to do that because you had to look at them to like know where they were. And you could accidentally hit like drive and it would go really fast. So like people were doing that. And it was
I
like
see it.
hard to
Yeah, I see
control.
it.
You know what I mean? And it also had like a ton of buttons on the inside. You know, like a button to turn this off, a button to turn it on, a button to do this, to do this, to do this. So it was like somebody in the market research was like, I love buttons. And it ended up being like too much. Seatbelts were optional, just saying, because they're optional. And the outside of it, I know you're looking at it, it looks like a 50s car. It's almost as long and as wide as cars ever get. Like that, it's really, it's kind of short, wide, long. The most distinct feature is the grille in the front. So they had like another part of the research group that was like, we want it to look like a classic like 1920s car. So they made that like oval grille on the front. It says Edsel, but it looks like a egg and also potentially like a vagina.
I can see it.
Yeah.
It almost is very similar to like a Maserati or not a
Mhm.
Maserati, an Alfa Romeo. So Alfa Romeo, their grill is kind of like the centerpiece of their design philosophy, and it's very similar to that.
I feel like it's like a peachy cruiser where it's like this is gonna be so cool looking, and you're like, no, it didn't turn out cool looking. Like I know we
Yeah.
tried to look be nostalgic about the way cars used to look, but it didn't work. It didn't look
You know
bad.
what's funny is my parents' first car when we moved to America, it was a 1998 or 1988 Honda Civic, and it was an option to get seatbelts for anybody but the driver, and it was an option to have a side view mirror on the passenger side, and so my parents didn't pay for that, and so only the driver had a seatbelt.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I rely a lot on my mirrors as well.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really funny. There was a lot of chrome, obviously, like, you know, you see that as a 50s car, of course, there's chrome. The thing that I think is the most fun is in the back, there's like a wing, like a tail on the back, and then there's the blinkers. And the blinkers are like little triangles and they point in. So like they look kind of cool, but
They
when you're
the arrow is the
go
wrong
the wrong
way.
way. Yeah, exactly. So when you're turning left, the arrow is blinking right, even though it's on the left side of the car, and it's like very confusing.
Mini Coopers do that now. Mini
Do they
Coopers
really?
literally do that now. Yeah,
So
it's
funny.
funny.
So so it's like, you know, like I said, you take everyone's dream car and you get a mess. You know, Ford also didn't make a plant specifically for the Edsel and the Edsel models. So people had to stop making the cars that were on the line. They would like stop the line and then make a few Edsels, but they wouldn't always have the right stuff. So they would send them to dealerships like incomplete and be like,
Yeah,
hey, you guys put this on, or like you guys finish this or whatever. So things would like fall off the car and like it just like wasn't ready. Which like they tried to say like, you know, that happens with a brand new car, like things aren't perfect on day one, but they like really were like, this is gonna be perfect on day one, you know, and then it
right.
wasn't. And so that people saw that and were like really disappointed. They did a lot of weird things at dealerships. They would do like a raffle for someone to like win a car if they like took a test drive. At one point, every single test drive, you got a free mini Edsel, like a mini car for like your kids, like not to ride in, but like a toy.
Right.
They also had one where every person who bought an Edsel got a literal pony
What?
because somebody was like, it'd be
That's
cool to have a
so
pony.
irresponsible.
Ford sent ponies to thousands of dealerships around America, and the dealers were pissed because they're like, I have to take care of a fucking pony.
That's so irresponsible.
So they had to like feed them and build a pony corral and like do all these things. And eventually they were like so mad that Ford had them all taken back and took them back to Detroit, and Lord knows they must be glue by now.
Ugh.
The interesting thing about those was that usually it's up to the dealer to sell the car. So when you go to a dealership and there's like free coffee and hot dogs and like you get a deal, like that's all the dealer trying to get you to sell the car. But this was like literally Ford being like, we need to do something. We are not selling enough of these. They needed to sell 200,000 Edsels a year to make it profitable. And in 1958, they sold 34,481.
Jeez. Yeah, it's not
So
good.
not even close. Eventually, Edsel was merged with Mercury and Lincoln for a division called the MEL division, but the Edsel didn't last past like 1960. Eventually, they had a net loss of $350 million, which is about $3.5 billion today. Um, and if the book, the Business Adventures book, if in 1955 they decided not to do it at all and they just gave away 110,810 Mercuries, they would have lost less money.
It's
You know,
crazy.
like they're just on that. So there's a couple quotes that I have highlighted in the book that are like, who's to blame? One person, oh, Craffy, who was like in charge of the department, said that This is it. He said, the Edsel is a success. This is a new idea. It's a you idea. On the American road, the Edsel is a success, which sounds like, who you're trying to convince, me or you.
Yeah, no kidding.
Another guy said, Doyle, who I think is one of the other people who was like involved, but he said it was a buyer's strike, quote, people weren't met in the mood for the Edsel. Why not is a mystery to me. What they'd been buying for several years encouraged the industry to build exactly this kind of car. We gave it to them and they wouldn't take it. Well, they shouldn't have acted like that. You can't just wake up somebody one day and say, that's enough. You've been running in the wrong direction. Anyway, why did they do it? Golly, how the industry worked over the years, getting rid of gear shifting, providing interior comfort, providing plus performance for use in emergencies. And now the public wants these little Beetles. I don't get it.
I mean,
So they're mad.
I can understand the sentiment of like, we tried to give you all this. One thing that this reminds me of is, remember with this, I mean, we were really small kids when the Segway was coming out, but remember
Yeah.
the guy who invented it was like this revolutionary inventor who like created all this like medical devices, and he was like, this thing is going to literally change the way the world works. And so by the time he released the Segway, we were all like picturing flying cars, and this dorky,
Yeah.
stupid scooter comes out. It's like, what the hell is? It's like you build up this anticipation. It's almost impossible to live up to it.
Totally. He was like, yeah, the Segway guy, I remember, he's like, this is gonna change everything. You're like, how do I carry my groceries? What are you doing? What is this?
And the best part was like the founder of it like rode it off a cliff and died.
I know.
It's
Oh my
like,
God.
so terrible.
I did do a Segway tour of Chicago with my Aunt Luann, and it was so fun. But
But would you ever like you as a human? Would you spend
not.
$8,000? Okay, there you go.
No, of course not. But yeah, just like you're saying, it's timing. It was time for smaller cars. Like they moved on. Like didn't want these like big boat cars anymore. And it really wasn't anything special after all.
Yeah.
Like whatever. So eventually in 1959, they stopped the production. The last Edsels were the 1960 version of them. Ford, as you may notice, is fine as a company. They were fine. The shares went up. They still had other money. They still had other things going on. People who got screwed were the dealers, and thousands of regular people who worked in the factories got laid off because they weren't making that car anymore. But the shareholders were fine, and they moved on.
Yeah.
Continued to make cars, but it was just like an experiment in cars that was wildly unsuccessful.
So that's another thing that Tesla did that was actually really, really revolutionary to the industry, was because there were rules legally, regulatorily, that required for you to have a dealership to sell vehicles. So you could never buy direct. You had to run through a middleman. And I mean, you bought cars from dealerships. I bought cars from dealerships. I'm sure a lot of listeners have as well. It is never a good experience. Like almost universally never. You got to talk to the finance guy who's going to tell you how you got to do this. Then the guy comes in and tries to sell you some guard material for the grill. Like, it's just like, it's a horrible, horrible experience. And I mean, my theory on this is that direct from manufacturer, online ordering of cars, that's going to be like the thing. And then because it's just a bad experience. So
Totally.
and it's partially for that reason too, is because they also get shafted. So they shaft the customer because the manufacturer shafts them by sending them 1,000 horses,
it's
or
awful.
because they'll send them like 7 versions of a car that 50,000 people want, and they'll deliberately underproduce them, then overcharge. It's a mess. It's a horrible, horrible mess. So hopefully that entire business model goes away.
Totally. I hear it.
I think that this is the reason why they changed car production to share major components with each other.
Totally makes sense, because they had to like stop the line to make the Edsel, which was like part of the problem.
Expensive. It's got to be so expensive. And also you got to like create all the individual components. That's why like Lincolns are just rebranded Fords and Lexus are rebranded Toyotas. It's just way cheaper to just like change the brands and some of the materials than it is to redesign the entire thing.
And Ford's the one pretending to have invented the assembly line this whole freaking time. So
I thought Ford did invent the assembly line.
He was the first one to use it, but I told you who invented it at the beginning of this episode.
You did, and well, let me look at this real quick.
Ransom E. Olds, which is a great name, Ransom.
Is he the guy who created Oldsmobile?
I don't know. Let's find out.
The silent portion of the podcast.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Ransom Eli Olds was a pioneer of the American automotive industry, after whom the Oldsmobile and REO brands were named. He claimed to have built the first steam car as early as 1887 and the first gasoline-powered car in 1896. Sweet. He was born on June 3rd, Gemini, just like me.
Nice.
Yeah, so if you learned anything from this, please just don't quote Henry Ford. Like, I know it's it's I don't know. It seems like it would be a good idea because he like said some like fun little snippets, but did he really even write those things? I don't know.
Yeah, we can. I think, like, again, I think you can hold two ideas to be true simultaneously.
You can, but then also like if you're
Like
gonna
Gandhi also fucked a bunch of like 12-year-olds.
that's what I'm saying. Like there is no great man. There is no
MLK
like
definitely cheated on Coretta a lot.
totally.
Like,
Totally. Well, that's what
like
I'm saying. You think there's no great man. There's no like one person who is perfect besides Abraham Lincoln because he changed his mind and he is awesome.
so I don't have the facts on me, so I'm not gonna push back right now. But I do recall reading that slavery actually wasn't the reason why he pushed so hard during the Civil War. It had to do with something else that was, I can't remember the exact reasoning behind it. I do remember the movie Lincoln does touch on it. It had something to do with uniting the Republican Party, and I don't remember what exactly. It's super nuanced. I'm not gonna get into
It wasn't the
discussion.
number one thing, but it was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in there and ended up being the thing that he did.
I'm not gonna get into like
Changed my much.
the Civil War, like the entire Civil War right now, but like, all I'm saying is, like, I take it in the spirit of like, people are a byproduct of the times that they're in.
Yes
And
and no.
it's easy when you're in modern times to look at past behavior and say, well, I wouldn't have been that way. But you don't know. Like, maybe the things that I'm doing right now, the fact that, maybe in like 500 years, dogs can vote. Dogs can, own property. And here I am owning a dog and putting it in a crate. I don't know what the future holds.
Well, I also said at the beginning of this that John Adams did not own slaves. So it wasn't like everybody was doing it.
That's true. I get it. I do think context is important, though.
I do too.
Like,
This
Obama
and
was
this is my
anti-gay
context.
marriage.
Exactly. And he changed his mind. And this is my context for not quoting Henry Ford anymore, is that Hitler liked him.
I know. I did read that actually when you were talking. I did go back and look up Henry Ford, and it was like she had like a full size picture of Henry Ford in his office, like, but he really loved him.
Yes.
I
I
hope
on the record and say that's bad.
I
say
hope
that's
somebody
bad.
I hope somebody at some point loves me as much as Hitler loved Henry Ford.
Thank you. That's it. That's all I wanted you to get out of this story is exactly that. And then do with
Awesome.
it what you will.
So since we're splitting the podcast up, this is kind of our conclusion.
I know. So I think I have 2 listener emails. So I'll do one
Let's hear it.
today right now. This is our first email. I was so freaking excited. And far as I like jumped up and like I was reading it in bed and I jumped up and like random as and I was like, we got an email. I texted you and I was like, we got an email. Oh my God.
I definitely got a text at like midnight.
I was so excited. But Kiara she's from Maryland. She was so fun. She wrote us an email and she said, Doomed to Fail podcast, ... first email, ? Because she's been listening and knows that we've been like dying for an email from a stranger. So thank you so much. And she had a couple great suggestions for some episodes that I forwarded along to you, Far as I think they fall into the true crime. So we'll definitely look for those later. But
I did. So I actually
Yeah.
researched both of them quite a bit, and I might use it as a topic later on, but the only reason I didn't use it as a topic now is because there's just not much material out there to actually research for it. And one of them is unsolved entirely. So there's it would basically be libel if I reach conclusions on what happened.
But we'll keep looking at it and please send us ideas and just
Yes.
thank you so much. It's so exciting. We feel very excited. I wrote back immediately and said, this is our first email in all caps. So she knows how excited we are.
Yeah, and guys, like, our listenership, our downloads and all that stuff has really like taken off really in the past like last episode or two. The one thing we would love, I think, generally speaking, is if you have a friend who's even has any remote interest in this topic, just ask them to download and maybe check out one of the smaller episodes that we have. So we're going to cut these out. We're going to cut these segments into half episodes, and they'll be easier to digest, easier to listen to on a quick drive or whatever. But we'd really, really appreciate it if you're able to kind of get 1 or 2 folks in your life to listen as well. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah. Oh my God, please. And we're on all the socials at Doomed to Fail Pod. So Twitter, reluctantly, Instagram, Facebook also reluctant. Okay, wait, hold on. Did you hear that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are gonna have a cage match, a cage
That's
fight?
not. There's zero chance that's happening. Zero. Yeah, I heard that, and I'm like, how many board members are just pulling their hair out? Like, you guys are the CEOs of like $3 trillion worth of business. You can't do this. It would be fun though. I got my money on Zuck.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
He's got youth and
I think when
experience.
I think when it comes when the rubber hits the road, I think he'd like go in low and dirty, and Elon couldn't handle it.
Although Elon looks huge. Elon looks like he's like a 250-pound
But I
behemoth
think
of a human.
it's all like not, I don't know. Did you see there was one thing that my my brother sent me, and it was like a woman being like, I don't see Elon in the submersible going through the Titanic. I think he's a chicken. Bark, bark, bark. Chicken. It's so funny because you're like, because that's something he would respond to. Anyway.
Dude,
Anyway.
I did read that there are other billionaires who literally have submersibles that can go down there, because when they were trying to bring back the Ocean Gate one of these billionaires, I forgot, he created some company and sold, like, it's a company we would all know, the brand. And he's like, oh, you need to go, how far you got to go? 12,000. Oh, I got my submersible going to do 12,005. I'm like, what? How do you all have these things? Like,
there's so many. There's like a bunch of billionaires that we've never heard of because they don't have cage matches with Mark Zuckerberg. They're just busy making their own submersible. Cowards, chickens.
So we thank you. Please do join us on all the socials. We'll go ahead and cut this off here. And
we'll see you in a few days.
In 3 days, you can join us again.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.